Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today I'm going to be covering a question that I've been asked by one of the students in my online podcasting course, Pod School. Shout out to Ketera. She has been asking me about whether or not episode numbers are an important thing to put in your episode titles. And it was perfect timing because I had just sat down recently with someone from Apple to talk about whether or not this is a good approach. And their answer was no. If you've already created your show, then you might have noticed some updates in the back end of your podcast host where there is now an option to label your episodes as either a trailer, a bonus, or a full episode. There's also an option there to highlight whether this is a season and to put a season number on. And you can also put the episode numbers in there. All of that gets imported into Apple Podcasts, so that with their iOS 11 update, all of those details appear actually in the podcast app. Of course, you don't need to do whatever Apple tells you to do, but the majority of your listens are probably going to come through Apple Podcasts, at least for the foreseeable future. They certainly have a huge portion of the listening market, so it is really important to optimize your show for that platform, and that's not in any way going to be a detriment to any of the other platforms. In fact, if those directories don't already use that system, then they'll probably move to it eventually. So the current best practice is to take those episode numbers out of your episodes. Sometimes people might use it because it can be an easy way to point people to episodes in their back catalogue. So if you want to refer to a show that happened 2 years ago, it's much easier to say, go and have a look at episode 5 than it is to say, go and look through for the episode that was about XYZ. But you can also use those numbers in your show notes URL. So if you use a plugin called Pretty Link, you can actually change up the URL. So if you find it easier to say, go to mypodcast.com/episode 5, you can point people there and then redirect to the page where your episode is. But having the numbers in the actual title is not necessary. It also clogs things up. You've got to think you've only got a limited amount of space for your audience to actually see what that episode is about. And if you're clogging up the front of that title with Season 1, Episode 1, then on some of the mobile devices or when they're looking at that title on a smaller screen, they're not actually even going to be able to see what the episode's about. It's just going to be all business in terms of the season numbers and episode numbers rather than any actual content. So it's always best to have your keywords as close to the front of your title as possible and to just make it as informative as you can, because this is the thing that when people find your show, they're going to be looking at to see whether they find your episodes interesting. And if all I can see on my mobile is Season 1, Episode 1, and I've got to wait until that little ticker scrolls across to see what your episode is about, I'm probably not going to be as enticed to listen. And if the big kids at Apple are saying that it's a no-go, it's probably best just to put content in your titles than it is to put numbers. As with everything in podcasting, there is no hard and fast rule. If you go, bugger it, I don't care what Apple says, I just want to put my damn numbers in my damn titles. And that's entirely up to you. You just need to think about why you're doing it. Some people, I think, do it for vanity stat reasons, so they can say, look at me with my 350,000 episodes in my feed, which is fine if you want to do that and that's important to you. It's your show. You can do whatever you want with it. But it is best practice now to keep those numbers out and to just keep the information in. I'll let you go marinate on that and you can make a decision all on your own, but I am purely here to throw out some ideas, a bit of advice, and then it is up to you to fashion your podcast however you wish to. You can find the show notes for this episode at podschoolpodcast.com, and I will, of course, leave a link to that plugin on the page there so you can have a look at that and pop it on your website if you think it's something that you might be able to use. At the website, you will also find my tech guide in case you haven't set up your home studio and you need a bit of assistance working out what you need, and a link to my online podcasting course, Pod School, which can take you through every single step of the process from start to finish. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next week, and until then, happy podcasting.
That's all for today.